Welcome back to our students. I'm Mr. Martinez.
I'm Miss Garcia.
Mr. Santiago here.
And this is History Talk. Well, if you don't remember, History Talk is that moment in your world history class where you're about to dive into your next history lesson. But instead of it being a live session, we've actually recorded it for you to make it nice and convenient. And within our video, besides you guys learning and taking in the new information, the video is going to stop a few different times to check for your understanding with the new things you've learned. So please follow along with us as we now go over part 2 of our episode on the aggression and appeasement of totalitarian regimes from 1930s to the 1940s, the first steps before World War II.
We're going to have a quick recap, everybody. Again, we remember that we have Germany and Hitler as their totalitarian dictator. In Italy, we have Mussolini, and in Japan, we have Tojo. They have joined together forces as fascist dictators in an alliance called the Axis powers. They have committed acts of aggression towards their neighbors and have imperialized nations in order to expand their empires. Remember, that's the big thing that we want to keep in mind. Not only is it that they're fascists, not only is it that they want to drive for power, but that they have this need to imperialize, to grab and take those resources. And here's another one. Something that's special about these fascists is that they feel that they are superior than their neighbors. And that makes their neighbors, by default, inferior. And that is why they justify their acts of aggression against these other people. Okay? The Axis powers have supported the rise of another totalitarian fascist dictatorship in Spain with Franco during the Spanish Civil War in 1936. And as we have discussed before, the Western democracies have chosen a path of appeasement in order to avoid war, with the promise that the Axis powers will not further aggress. Spoiler alert, they lied.
And boy, did they lie. Unfortunately, when it came to appeasement policies used on these totalitarians during before World War II, we noticed that they were not going to work. They were not effective in stopping the ambitions of these countries who want to take the world. They want total control as far as they can get. And we've talked about these few steps like you see on here, this timeline that shows the Axis powers and how they've continued with their aggressions, with both the appeasement responses from the Western democracy. Once again, that's France, Italy, and America. France, England, and America. But while they have their team, the Axis powers have been busy making theirs, which is now officially together with Nazi Germany, Italy, and Japan joining the fascist team. And they're going to see continuous expansion, especially around their neighboring countries like Germany in particular, who takes a lot of Central Europe, like Austria, and Czechoslovakia. But we also mentioned last time, it's not just the Europeans. Japan joined, and they've been busy in the Asian plains, taking a lot of the Pacific area, creating their empire. And there has been collaboration and talk within the Munich Pact to try to stifle these ambitions. Once again, another appeasement to try to stop Hitler and these teams from gaining their control. But Hitler and many of them did not only double-cross the Western democracies, but they even double-crossed one of their former players or teammates, being Hitler.
Okay, so let's do a little recap again about Germany's continued acts of aggression. As we discussed before, they have the German onslaughts of the Third Reich. That would be the inclusion of Austria and Czechoslovakia into the German territory. Austria and Czechoslovakia are just south of Germany. At one point, Lots of years ago, they all fell under the German Empire. But when the German Empire fell, they all began to become independent territories. What Hitler wants is for them to become one whole German Empire again. So what do? Germany invades Czechoslovakia and breaks his promise. Hitler's breaking a lot of promises. We're going to talk a little bit about his promise that he made to Stalin and how he breaks that also.
So, like Ms. Garcia mentioned, Hitler's goal is unification. He wants Germany to be back where it used to be before they lost in World War I, but eventually he's going to be even wanting to go further than that. But that was his first goal, to make Germany be back whole again as one solid piece that it used to be, and maybe even bigger. And it's all under the idea of nationalism, your identity as a person. Especially German people, is how he utilizes as his rationale for why he's justified in taking this land. You have to remember there's this idea that there's a superiority of German people who feel that they have the justification to leave whatever former country they had and to join Germany, and that land to go with them when they decide to go to Germany. Essentially, wanting access to natural resources is what was really wanted, but the identity of nationalism was how he was able to convince people that he has a right to take this land because those people belong to Germany. They're Germans. But in reality, all of this land grabbing is also helping the production of his war machine that he's trying to boost up. Once again, over here, the new land's being useful for German products. But we're going to notice the ways that he handles certain of these countries are very different. They all respond differently. Like you see right here, Hitler demanded Austria, for example, to rejoin Germany. And though the Austrian chancellor refused, Hitler used propaganda and the German military to force Austria into submission. Submission into the sense that they give up and say, okay, you get to own this country now. So initially, Austria says, no, we get what you're trying to say, but we want to keep our country. But through series of propaganda, and when he does send the military in, the citizens from that country are so sold on Hitler. Because you have to remember, people back then, even though he's creating these atrocities and are about to create more, they think of him as a celebrity. They think of him as this really famous guy. So when they hear that they want to be occupied by him, they say sure, and they follow through not knowing what that would exactly mean. Hitler's actions in Austria are obviously a direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles. Many of the things are, but guess what? He doesn't care. He's already pushed that boundaries and seen that there was no accountability when he broke the rules, so he's just going to keep on going, especially for that Rhineland, that special piece of land in between him and France. What is happening with the Western democracies' response to this? Unfortunately, there's still not much that is to be said about what were their accountabilities of Hitler. There was still nothing that were being done.
He doesn't stop in Austria. The Germans continue to aggress eastward. The Sudetenland was a German-speaking territory in Czechoslovakia that Hitler demanded be incorporated or brought back into the German Third Reich. You can see in the map how we have Germany and the surrounding lands. Underneath it, we have Austria, Czechoslovakia, France, the pink area, which was the Rhineland, and Poland. The Western democracies, as we knew them before, which was France, Britain, and the United States, they meet at what is called the Munich Conference in 1938. And they meet with Hitler to decide how can they prevent him from aggressing any further. Remember, he's already broke the Treaty of Versailles by bringing back the German military. He's already broke the Treaty of Versailles by entering into the Rhineland, into Austria, and now he's entering into Czechoslovakia and the Sudetenland. So they decide, okay, we have to meet and we have to figure something out because he keeps breaking his promises. So now we need to sit down and figure something out. France convinces the Czech people to release the Sudetenland, their small portion of Czechoslovakia, to the Germans. And Hitler promises no further expansions. Again, he says, I promise I won't do it anymore. You guys, what do you think is going to happen? There are conflicting opinions about what is happening at the Munich conference. Not everybody feels like it is a great outcome. Some people think it's the best thing that could happen. Let's discuss some of those opinions of the Munich conference. One thing that was said was the Munich Pact had saved Czechoslovakia from destruction and Europe from Armageddon. This is what the British Prime Minister Chamberlain said. He felt that by giving up a little bit of Czechoslovakia, then it would prevent everybody from having to go to war. And they were willing to make that sacrifice, and they were willing to make that concession in order to stop or prevent going to war. However, in response to joyous crowds that greeted him in Paris, the French leader Edouard Delierre said, "The fools, why are they cheering?" So we know that the French have a different opinion. They gave in to Hitler again, and he knows he's probably not going to stop there. Another opinion that was shared by British politician Winston Churchill, he said they had to choose between war and dishonor. They chose dishonor, and they will have war. So you can see, everybody's really caught between a rock and a hard place. Like Mr. Martinez said earlier, they are willing to sacrifice these smaller countries in order to prevent themselves from having to go to war. They just left a huge war during World War I. They don't have the financial or military stability to get into a fight. And they are just really kind of giving Hitler his way in hopes that he will eventually stop. And we kind of know what's going to happen next.
All right, for this checkpoint, guys, I want you guys to act like lawyers. The people call Adolf Hitler to the witness stand. We want to know his justification, his reasoning, his explanation, his argument for taking other lands, other countries away. So for this checkpoint, we're asking you this. What was Hitler's justification for aggressions in Austria and Czechoslovakia? Again, what was Hitler's justification, argument, or explanation for aggressions in Austria and Czechoslovakia?
Good job. Thank you so much for responding to that. The idea of German unification under his idea of this nationality is definitely the thing that he's shooting for, though not everyone is sold on his pitch. But like we see, there's a lot of foreshadowing, and it's for this big old event right here, folks, the beginning of World War II, the sequel that we saw previously in the First Global War. Because we know Hitler's not going to listen to these promises just as much as he wasn't going to listen to the Treaty of Versailles. He's playing the game of world domination. World domination, the first time that we're seeing him and his team trying to compete against what was the old order in the world. So you see Hitler invades and takes control of Czechoslovakia completely, and after that goes completely unhinged with doing what he wants at that point with no more collaboration. People, especially the Western democracies, now understand there is no way you can negotiate with Hitler. There's no way you can talk yourself out of this, which leads to the inevitable. Hitler and Stalin surprised everyone, though, because like Ms. Garcia mentioned in a previous episode, the communists and the fascists hate each other. They're both pretty bad, but they don't like each other. They have different thinkings. So Hitler in the beginning is friends with Stalin, but he's going to backstab him with a secret invasion. But before they were friends, they had agreement under the Nazi-Soviet Pact in 1939 where they decided, hey, you know that country in between us called Poland? You take half, I take half, and we'll decide to share. So they were friends, but that was just Hitler getting closer to his next target, the communists. There was ideas and hopes of that they were going to try to keep their alliance, especially Stalin. He really wanted to keep it going as he didn't want to compete with Hitler. especially with the idea that they weren't going to interfere. But unfortunately, the world wasn't big enough for them to share in Hitler's eyes. He was adamant about trying to eliminate the communists. Which leads us to our next conversation we'll have, which is, of course, the World War II that officially begins in September 3rd, 1939, when you start to see the Western powers finally declaring war.
All right, guys, there's a lot of foreshadowing coming from Ms. Garcia and Mr. Martinez. At what point did it become clear to you that appeasement would not work with Hitler, and why? Again, at what point did it become clear that appeasement would not work with Hitler, and why?
Perfect. Good job at responding at that.
We're going to go over the last section for today, which is the essential question. Remember, we previewed this at the very beginning of our lectures, and we're going to go over that right now. The essential question is for something for you to wrap up all of your thoughts into one idea. We want you guys right now to describe the aggressive actions of totalitarian regimes and the response of Western democracies. So all of the totalitarian actions, all of the aggressions by Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, Tojo, and Franco, all of those. Can you summarize those for us? And then can you tell us, how did the Western democracies act? How did they respond? Britain, France, the United States? What was their response to the to the Axis powers and to all of our fascist and communist and totalitarian acts of aggressions? What did they do? For my class, you guys are going to go to the assignment week 5, assessment in Google Classroom. You're going to want to answer the essential question using information from the slides that we covered from this history talk. You can also use the previous history talk to help you guys provide information when you're responding to the essential question. And remember, while you're responding, you're going to want to respond in at least 5 complete sentences, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 complete sentences. And again, in order to make your response as good as it can be, in order to demonstrate your understanding clearly and thoroughly, you're gonna wanna use evidence from the previous history talks in order to make your writing solid, in order to demonstrate your understanding. We have included a little special tool for you guys. We have included terms and vocabulary. So on the left side in the red, you will see some key terms: aggression, appeasement, ultranationalist, imperialism, Rhineland, and the Third Reich, and their definitions. But we've also included some vocabulary terms on some things that we have covered or some things that might not be so clear for you guys. For example, the terms are condemned, atrocities, mutilated, defiance, demoralized, pacifism, interfere, and emboldened. So I highly encourage you guys to check these out, and double points for you guys if you are able to use these in your responses.
So do make sure you give some good, proper responses, utilizing all this information that you've learned, using maybe even these key vocabulary terms to make that 5 complete sentences. For Mr. Martinez students, we have that same expectation. You're merely going to go ahead and respond to it on the next slide on your pod. But that's it for this one, ladies and gentlemen. That is it for this episode of History Talks. We have definitely covered those aggressions and the appeasements that tried to follow when it came to these totalitarians. But that's it for this lesson. Stay tuned for World War II, as that's our next episode with History Talk. I'm Mr. Martinez.
I'm Ms. Garcia.
Mr. Santiago.
And we are signing out. Ladies and gentlemen, please make sure you finish your assignment, and thank you so much.